Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's UPG/SITECH April Mega Training. I'm jumping in and helping out the team today, and we're talking about connecting Trimble products. It's a pretty broad topic, so I've kind of taken a presentation I did last year, and I'll run through that data set of how we use some of the various Trimble technologies in that, and then talk a bit about integrating some of the other products as well. So I'm happy for you to jump in and ask some questions along the way if you want. So I've requested that Ross, who's our honourable chairman for these meetings, has changed the settings so you can unmute today. And yeah, happy to take a few things along the way and see how we go. So let's share screen. Okay, that looks like it's working. Let's jump into PowerPoint and PowerPoint. Okay, so what I thought I'd cover in connecting Trimble products is a test project I put together last year for a presentation at the Southeast Asian Survey Congress in Darwin. And it was really there to utilise Trimble Business Centre, Trimble Access, leveraging our Connect cloud platform and the sync manager so that we could send and receive from the field. There was also an aspect of looking at, well, where might survey go in the future as well, and how could, if we had 5G, how might we be able to leverage technology like drone survey in the field for preparing a survey and then having that data fed back in relative real time, especially with the advances in cloud computing as well. So we don't need to worry about that, but it did put together a project which used the drone aspect as well. We processed that in UAS Master and tied that into Trimble Business Centre. And then the data was taken across and visualised in Trimble Clarity as well. And I'll touch on Site Vision a little bit and how that can also be used to feed back into Trimble Business Centre and the like as well. So initially it was looking at, well, when I looked back at how I used to do surveys, and a lot of people did also, of taking a lot of field papers out. You might run a highlighter over them and figure out what you need, but whether we could actually start by preparing in the office a little bit more consistently, and the evidence we get from a paper PDF is really useful as well, because you can't key all of that in, but we can leverage that and still provide it without having to take those papers out in the field. So in this case, I prepped a job with Business Centre and started on the datum that I wanted to work in. I'll open up Business Centre once we get through a little bit of the presentation side of this and show you what I had done to achieve some of it. Started on datum. We fed in the primary survey control that was available, and then keyed in the surveys that were sitting there that were available as well. Some survey evidence on datum, and also had background imagery, the cadastral map base, and a re-establishment of sorts of tying in from the control that was known. As long as we could find some of these things, then we should be able to lay out that nice little blue parcel there. And that was using the Kogo creation tools in Business Centre. Now, the pieces that we lack when we go out in the field, if we're not taking out the paper, all of these additional little descriptions that we would get. These are an example of some survey, they call them abstractive field record. in Victoria, but similar to a survey plan that you'd see in other states as well. And these always contain a lot of extra description, and it's a lot easier just to have a look at a PDF than to be keying in all of these additional attributes and notes and descriptions on a point that you then have to interrogate in the field. It's nice just to still have that aspect. So what we do to help facilitate that is Business Centre has tools for georeferencing images. It also has tools for georeferencing PDF and anything of that type. If, for instance, the PDF had been created from a CAD package where we get what's called a vector graphic instead of a raster PDF, then we're also able to leverage that and re-extract the line work. These ones happen to just be a raster, so all we get is an image by itself. But even in doing that, we're able to place the PDF so that it sits where the particular parcel re-establishment was, and the scale on these is never as to scale. So what we do, or what I like to do, is just position it relatively. You get most of the detail that you need without having to occupy the entire sheet space. Once we've placed these into TBC, they still exist as a PDF, but they're not actually they're not able to be georeferenced like a background image, because when we do that in Trimble Access or other packages with a true aerial image, it will come through as either a TIFF or a JPEG or another format, but it also contains what's called a world file, which defines where the corners of that image are so that it can be rotated in space and applied. Now, Business Centre has a nice little tool that once we've actually placed these in space, anything that's visible in our map screen, we can just hit capture. It will capture the scene that's currently displayed on the screen. And because we're in a real world coordinate system, in this case, it was GDA 2020 on zone 55, then a world file is also created, and that can be sent to Trimble Access and applied as a background image quite quickly. And that applies for anything that you can see in Trimble Business Centre as well. Okay, and there it is overlaid, a little bit easier to see where the map base has been overlaid and also the existing surveys. So now when we open up Trimble Access, what we start to see in here is our cadastral map base as a background, and these are applied in this case as an active map, so the line work is selectable, although it's rarely to scale that would be possible for using as a re-establishment. The map base is always, I guess, made a little bit ambiguous, and the accuracy isn't down to that level that we'd want as surveyors, but it's quite good as an indicative way of working. But you can also see here, with a slight transparency applied, the survey notes as well. So here we've got our survey. It's down Leopold Street. This particular survey was in reference to this parcel, so I've scaled it based on one of the sides there, so we get roughly the right dimensions. But we can also just then have a look while we're in the field, and normally we would better check what the next image is. Yep, here we go. We're connected to a GNSS, and we can actually walk over the map, which means that we could roughly see what the descriptions were for these survey marks as we walk along out in the field, for these being might be a rivet or a chisel cut or some other survey mark being placed. So it becomes, I find, quite convenient compared to taking out a sheaf of papers and a folio still. And it has that added benefit that you're actually seeing it in reference to what you're doing on the ground as well. Depending how you want to georeference it, then it makes it quite a bit easier. Okay, I'll jump into how we actually use Sync Manager to get these to flow into the project once we get through just a bit of an overview in the slide deck as well. And yeah, feel free to jump in with any questions as we do as well. So one of the aspects of this was how could we complement traditional survey with drone survey? If the actual drone survey was able to be processed a lot quicker, then we may be able to leverage some of the deliverables coming from that out to the field. But that doesn't exist yet, just because of the limitations of uploading and downloading, and also computing those deliverables. So I've replicated what the workflow would be, but it's still a decent way of looking at how these things can be utilised, and you might find an application for them as a feedback loop from survey processed in TBC and UAS master, and then pushing back out to the field. So in this case, you could see the drone survey over this particular parcel, and we get some surrounding information as well. And then what we're able to do is create a surface from that and send it straight out to the field, so that we could be working with a relatively accurate surface to begin with if it was prepared with an RTK drone. And then as we work, we complement that and start to build it up, so we see a bit more information coming through. Now, with a number of instruments that we have available, the S series from the S7 and S9, and also our flagship instrument, the SX10. We also provide a function, we've copyrighted as being Trimble Vision as the marketing that we use around it, but it's an embedded camera so that we can see what we're looking at on the controller as what the instrument is looking at. And it also helps to provide documentation for what we've actually done in the field. And I think that adage of a picture being worth 1,000 words is quite valuable here, that if you've got surveyors out in the field, you prepare quite detailed field notes, and sometimes, I know I had in the past, utilised things like Google Street View if something just didn't quite make sense when that information's come back into the office. But with this vision technology, then you're able to also capture panoramas to be able to help with what's being documented in the field. And it might just be that visual communication. You may not be doing any measurements from this. It just helps to actually take a few photos. And that can be done from the controller as well. So the controller is able to take photos and geotag them onto a particular point as well. But the beauty of the station views is, as you rotate in 3D, you get to see all of the point and line work overlaid in reference to the views as well, and the photos and panoramas that have been captured. And that's consistent for both Trimble Access, where you'll see those geometries overlaid in the field, and also in Trimble Business Centre. So if necessary, and something that was taking a step further, you can also use a scanning function. In this case, it's done with the SX10, but the S series, S7 and S9 also provide a very light duty scanning function as well, so that if additional information was required rather than just discrete points, we can also capture that and see it overlaid with our imagery and take that back to the office for analysis too. And one thing that's that I find interesting that doesn't get used more, and perhaps it's just around knowledge of how these tools can fit together and how you can use them for documentation and quality assurance. In Victoria, and the way that I was trained on doing cadastral surveys, we would always take some sort of independent check, and a lot of time this is done through a taped offset. So in this regard, we've taped our offset. We're actually using the SX10, facing down and aiming the instrument at the tape. In this case, I've captured a photo without the crosshair being applied over the top, but I have stored a point so that we get an exact point being overlaid at the same orientation as the image. So we could see that this was measuring that would be 1.03 meters. Yeah, and able to use that as a tool just to verify that there haven't been any typos out in the field. And this all flows back seamlessly to Trimble Business Center just via the synchronizing that's embedded in Trimble Access. And that's consistent for, although the TSC3s don't work with SX10, there is also that synchronizing function and vision function that works with our more traditional S-series instrument that works with the TSC3 as well. So all of this can be leveraged on a lot of our portfolio, from our S7, S9, TSC3 combinations, and also to the SX10 with T10 or TSC7 or even T7 now. Okay, so I'll jump off that slide deck and we'll jump into the software. Is there any questions so far? Anything I should just have a look in the chat window? No, nothing so far. Okay. So this was the job that was prepared for taking out into the field. And if we zoom in here, you could see how these have been placed and some of the detail that exists on the PDF so that we can actually utilize this information as well. Gives us a lot more than just what we would generally key in, starting from scratch of keying in surveys. We haven't quite caught up with New Zealand of being able to leverage an automatic download of all of this survey information to bring in from a database, but we'll get there one day. So for now, this acts as a pretty good way of doing these things. We just drag and drop the PDF, and what you'll see is if you drag a whole PDF in and it has multiple pages, each page comes in separately. So I've got 3 different surveys here, but you can see I've taken page 6, page 1, and page 7 from these, and I've only georeferenced and retained the pages that I actually want in the Business Center project, just to help clean up the data so that I'm not filtering through things that I don't want and leaving legacy items there that aren't required either. I'll just turn off some of the layers and just only this. So, as you can see here, it's nicely georeferenced in. One of the tools that we can also use to assist with this, if we didn't have any survey information to start with, but wanted to take some of this information out in the field and use a more paperless workflow. Just down in the bottom tray here, we've got our map views that allow us to toggle the background map. And if I zoom out and just let that cache for a moment, we'll see that that starts to be overlaid and applied in here. And we can set things like, I jump into here. Oh, they're going to let me. This is this one, properties. We can apply transparency here just to help with seeing where that is in its real world location as well. And obviously you can see here the scaling of these particular documents is quite a bit out just to be able to fit on a single sheet. If you're not aware, when we're using the background map, we can also just come up to the properties of the project, and we can change that from the digital globe imagery that you're seeing there to Trimble Map View, which is effectively like a Google Maps version. So you get the actual street labeling and just generic parcel identification rather than what we're seeing there. Okay, so I'll change that back to have no transparency applied, and I'll remove this. So when I've done done this and wanted to take it to the field, then just under the CAD tab here in the ribbon, we have this little button for capture. And it can be capture for anything. I quite often use this to capture a nice three-dimensional view of a surface or some stockpiles, and then apply it to some custom reports in Word that we can run out of TBC. But in this case, we're going to use it to capture a TIFF image that will be taken through to the field. We do have a few different options we can leverage as file formats for doing this. I find that the TIFF image, although it is slightly bigger, the way that it's being stored tends to operate a little bit quicker, and you'll have less latency when you do get into Trimble Access. It is a lot more beneficial on Trimble Access in a TSC7 or a T10, something running on a Windows operating system like Windows 10, rather than the TSC3, where the size of the screen and the limitations of the computing that we have on that device meant it had to be lower resolution, and the benefits that you see just aren't as sharp and clear as what you do get from the newer controllers. Always use the highest resolution you can, and depending on what details you want, you don't necessarily need to take all of this information. You can just zoom in, and if this was all you really wanted to see, then we can hit apply and store that. Now, I'll do that for a moment. Apply, and we've just stored our Leopold-001 TIFF. If we wanted to be quite specific in how we took this information out, then we could use the plot boxes available here. I haven't created one in this instance. It's sort of a quick and dirty workflow. But if we did, then we can specify an exact boundary around this as we create the images. We can also just grab into this, see what it has stored, and go from there. Okay, and just to explain what's in the background of these, hold on one sec. I'll go to this one, snapshots. So when we create these, what we get is this TIFF world file, and this is what makes the whole workflow nice and easy, that it just opens straight up, and we don't need to worry about where it's going to be placed. So that information gives it some coordinates, some rotations, and away it goes, so that as we jump into Trimble Access, it just works straight away. Now, synchronizing to Access, I'll just go to Trimble Sync Manager and let that open for a moment. Should be this one. From Trimble Business Center, we have embedded a send to Sync Manager function, and that will package up points, lines, and surfaces. And I think that's been covered in one of the other sessions in more depth, but it allows us to link these files into a job that we're creating in the office to be sent out to the field. Now, I'll just open up this job. It's a slightly different one, but that's okay. All right, no, I don't want that one. I'll just create a new one. Okay. So in this case, we get project files. So they are consistent across the entire project. They're not going to be in every single job that's created within a Trimble Connect project. For functions that sit outside of where we see here for points, lines, and surfaces, in Sync Manager, it just becomes a case of either clicking to browse to what you want, and depending on how you add it in, if you only want it existing on a single job, you just do it here. If you want it in the project, you do it through there. I'll just jump to here and go to snapshots, and I just created this this TIFF file here. Quite simple, just load that in, and that would now be sent, and as we start Trimble Access, it would automatically synchronize and become a background map in there. Anything else that's required in the field as well that you might want to leverage, it might be a job site analysis, some sort of a SWIMS documentation. You can also add these in. These will be synchronized into the project folders, and because all of the new controllers are running Windows 10, then you should just be able to open those up like any PC and fill them out if they've been designed in that way. So it makes it a nice way of packaging everything for an entire survey, and I feel the benefit is that by the time you hit synchronize and send it back again, it's all sitting there. There's no chance of losing any paperwork there. If we're running this and synchronizing the whole thing, then we would just click on whatever we've got created in there, create, and away we go. We're able to allocate this and assign it to particular people, and they'll get an email notification that they have a job assigned to them. In the Trimble Connect world, that's called a to-do, and so it's basically a task that's allocated to you that you then go off and complete, and we get some visibility around whether that's been picked up or not and when it's been completed. Okay. I'll fire up Access just to see it on the end side of where it feeds into and what it looks like. Should get there. Come on. Yeah. Okay, so this slightly different job I'm opening up, but in this case I loaded in DXF, which we'll see here, and just comes through. In this case I haven't made it selectable, so I can't actually jump onto any of these points and try to grab them. We're doing a session this afternoon on some tips and tricks around Trimble Access, so we'll go a bit more in depth in some of these. But in this case, particularly for the map-based image, let's just accept that. We can see that drops straight in. Similarly for the, let's switch this one on. I've did something quirky with this one, but we could see that dropping in there. Thought it might be more visible doing it in yellow when I'm out in daylight, just as a test for this particular one. But we can see here where we're able to have that georeferenced around that particular point. Put the names on. Got our point there. I've just placed it so that the points line up on the not to scale diagram and get a rough orientation that it's looking correct, and we can read off any dimensions to help us try and find these permanent marks, or similarly for survey information. So once that all comes back into the office, we do that by just coming to job, and you can see this one's got a nice green tick against it. It's already in job fieldwork complete. When these come down to the field controller, they're allocated as being new. If we make them in progress, then there's also a feedback to the office in Trimble Sync Manager that someone preparing this data can see that it has actually been started and is in progress. And when we hit complete, it automates the uploading process. So as I was showing in the earlier part of this, the scans, the images, anything that's being associated. So you could be adding in photos from the controller. You might even add in, some other documents that you've prepared. You could take photos of some field notes and be able to synchronize those in the same function as well. And what we get back at the end of it is, I'll just turn off some of these photogrammetry settings. And in the case of this particular survey with an SX10, we brought back all of this information. So we still have our map base in the background. I've switched off and removed some of the georeferenced images just to help clean it up for this presentation. But we also have all of our observations. We've got a surface I initially created from the drone that came through from UAS Master, and I'll turn some parts of that off, get rid of the layers, put on the map base. Yep, and helps us just to easily see this how it's come in there. And what have I done here? Lost more information than I wanted. I think I've processed the feature codes there already. But the other benefit here is we're in station view, and if I turn back on our photogrammetry, then we have that, and I'll turn off the image frames. Here we can see all of the vectors and points being overlaid in this view as well, whether they're something that's been keyed in previously. So from an existing survey, I've keyed in these marks, and then I've also got some additional points that I've surveyed where I was taking check offsets. We can see here through the different images available, different cameras available on the SX10. I've got my main panorama covering quite a bit of area. In this case, we did it twice. That's why there's the parallax in the images. We forgot to take the tele camera shot, but nicely documented, flowing back into the office from the field fairly easily. So when we've got the scans on as well, and we'll just change that to color-coded intensity, we can see here we're able to complement the discrete points that we've surveyed along with the imagery with some laser scanned points. There I go, walking up the street as it's capturing its images, making sure we're getting the most out of our time. Now, for taking this a step further and using all of this clever information we've got and visualizing, what we can do is a little bit too bright for my eyes this early in the morning. We'll go back to true color. What we can leverage here from a design aspect is TBC has an ability to export SketchUp files, and we could do some designing in here or house placement to be able to more easily figure out what the overshadowing problems are here. And something I'll add in that's just been recently released is SketchUp's Scan Essentials, which allows all of the point cloud to be dropped into SketchUp and modeled from SketchUp directly. A nice little tool for those of you working with scan data and designing and modeling in SketchUp. Now, when we do that, it makes it nice and easy for the architects to be able to see it. But what we really want, and what I think we've got some great tools that we can use and connect to in the Trimble portfolio, is being able to display this incredibly geometrically rich data set. It has every geometry in there that we can see by line of sight, either from the scanner in this case or drone as a combined data set. And also station views as well will come in. It's Trimble Clarity. Now, some of you may be familiar with Trimble Clarity in version 1. Last year, we basically went back to the drawing board a little bit and rebooted that particular platform so that it was a lot more beneficial in what it would do. Now I just need to pin or unpin this toolbar. How do I? No, I'll assume can't unpin that at the moment. So this is through Trimble Business Centre. What I've done is, come on back, is selected out the point cloud and just use the publish to clarity option. And what that does is it allows me to take all of this point cloud. I can give it a project name. I can also take through the station panoramas if I wish to. And it pushes that up to our cloud platform so that when you want to share it with other people that don't necessarily have any viewing software like a TBC or a RealWorks or any desktop variety of point cloud viewers as well, it allows them to just log into this web portal and actually be able to come in and see all of the measured entities and what the existing environment is. And in this instance, I didn't design this. I've cheated and gone to the SketchUp warehouse because I'm no SketchUp ninja. The house can be dropped into place, and we can get a better feel for how the designed build is actually going to interface with the existing environment. Potentially, what you could also be doing here, and I'm surprised that more town planners aren't asking for data sets like this rather than PDFs and things that are somewhat spatially vacant. They seem to lose a lot of information. We could actually be modeling the overlooking and overshadowing into here as well, and providing that in a way that anybody can come in and see what the physical effect is on the ground, to be able to just get a nice, easier feel here of how things are operating. And within this, we can also measure, take some offsets. We can click through and cut through this so that we can see a quick cross section. And when we have the station panoramas in here as well, actually I might just let's chuck one of them in at least. This one will do. Shouldn't take too long if I'm only sending the one image, even when I'm doing a web call. Hopefully, fingers crossed, it doesn't lose it. Waiting for that to go. Here we go. Initializing, sending to queue, and then it will upload it. We'll check back on that in a moment to show you the station view. The other component that I think we can connect into here, for this particular survey, I used Sight Vision, and I'll jump down to the slides deck here. So this is the same location, using Sight Vision to go out onto the site, have the 3D model placed and georeferenced where it should be in the world. In this case, this line work, I should have removed this, but it was at a 0. It was never at the correct elevation, so I'd roughly brought it up to where it should be visualized, but it does create a little bit of a parallax effect when it wasn't quite on the ground level. It allows us to walk around and actually look through windows, see how a design would look when we're out in the field, and rather than trying to interpret a flat paper plan sheet of what things are going to look like, we can actually wander through this. And similar to clarity in that you're seeing the design versus what we've measured as the existing conditions, here you can walk out and see the existing conditions and the relationship to the design. I'll jump into a quick video here because it ties into the connecting idea that we've been talking about. Now, where are we? So, one. So this is what we see in the field when we actually run Sight Vision, for those of you that haven't had a demonstration of it at the moment. We connect to our catalyst antenna, we jump in and we prepare a model. We can load any models from Trimble Connect and down through. These are easily georeferenced with a neat little SketchUp plugin or through Trimble Business Center, and it takes a variety of different files. It also has a lot more options for georeferencing when you're in the field, if you hadn't done the hard work, I shouldn't say hard work, the easy work of georeferencing it in the office. But in this case, you can see here a little tunnel design that's I've put underneath this bridge abutment, and we can fade that in and out. And it allows us to get that really immersive take on this. And this is still using the same things that we've used so far. The initial survey was done with Trimble Access. It was positioned with an R10 rover, so that when we did our design, placed the design, creating a quick calibration file from Business Center and loading that through the Sight Vision workflow, then it drops straight into where it should be. And we can actually, in this case, take some quick offsets from the design to the physical environment, which makes it a really nice tool because it does have that EDM embedded, and we're taking some components that we've done from our previous survey, combining that with the data. Now these measurements, this is where we come back into connecting the products. These measurements are able to be synchronized, and they give us a bit of information, and I'll just jump out of this video. Go back to documents, sorry. They give us a little bit of information that is usable just for a QA afterward. You can see here that I've made measurements at a certain time, certain date, what the name was, how we performed these measurements. So they were from AR, our augmented reality, or from the actual model that you were seeing there, to an EDM shot. And it also gives us some information on the GNSS at the time. It was measuring well, but we're starting to lose some of our azimuth constraints for the orientation of the device, which can happen in different environments. So these first couple were all green. The next ones, they might have a little bit of error because they've moved to orange. Now, looking at this by itself doesn't give you a huge amount of information other than the physical measurements. But what we could do in Business Center to close out this loop of taking pieces from our Sight Vision is that we would be able to write a little custom import format editor where we can just take through, for instance, if we wanted the easting, northing and elevation. And then we would have these points come in so that we can track what measurements were made in the field. We could add in a code or any other documentation around that. So it can act as a complete loop as well, that we're going from office with our initial survey to field, we're going back to office again, doing some designs, and then flying that either to a cloud platform or to the field again for inspections. And some of those inspections also flow back to the office as well. Now, it should have uploaded the station views, just to give you a quick idea of that. Here we go, Pano. And it's this one just here we can see. It's dropped into the right spot. We can see our little SX10 instrument logo. And what we get here is this nice little ability to rotate and actually overlay. On this side, we've got the point cloud and the model, and on this side, we've just got the imagery by itself. So if we wanted to see parts of this against the imagery, it's not able to do what we do with Sight Vision of a true augmented reality, but it does give us a lot of additional information that even without this aspect, someone can explore how the field looked at the time, what were the conditions where we went and did these measurements, what was the site condition, and then through use of the cloud and the model, we can also start to see another angle of viewing this and how it operates together. So probably the only component I missed in discussing this and the workflow of connecting all of these products here was the photogrammetry section. Now, I'll touch on that quickly, but I won't go into too much depth. For Trimble Business Centre, we can work with a number of different drone manufacturers. SenseFly, some of the older legacy Trimble drones when we were a drone hardware manufacturer. We also work with Delair, with Wingtra, and we're making some headway on working with other third parties as well so that they can be processed in a nice simplified workflow within TBC, which helps us to connect everything. But just within the Trimble portfolio, if you need a bit more power in your photogrammetry workflow and a true photogrammetric package because it has a lot of additional tools, then we can use the Send to UAS Master. And this is how I process this in particular, because the nice thing is if we start here from our field survey where we may have collected our GCPs, we're picking up the coordinate system. I can specify if I've got a couple of versions of UAS Master which install I want. And then for ground control points, I'll just turn off the scans and I will point IDs, feature code. Then we can select similar and grab all of these GCPs. I actually digitized some off the scan for roof lines just as a bit of a test case for processing. We grab all of these, we hit OK, and that seeds our photogrammetric processing. When we're finished in UAS Master, we bring that back into TBC seamlessly, where we don't have to worry about the coordinate systems, getting them to match up. It's handled because it's Trimble talking to Trimble, and it just matches, it works, makes our life easy, and that's what a lot of people are after, is a simplified workflow, which although it's a true photo package, which comes with some additional components that isn't for everybody, the workflow around Business Centre and sending back and forth become quite seamless in preparing that. Okay, so that covers off really most of what I wanted to discuss around connecting the Trimble products, of being able to utilise the Office and Field and a couple of different field softwares in there with Sight Vision and with Trimble Access. I didn't get into details, but I think I will discuss it this afternoon on the Trimble Access session called Integrated Surveying is one of the things that really helps to bind Total Station and GNSS in what is very much a nice workflow that I don't think there's many other manufacturers have such a seamless way of connecting GNSS and Total Station for initial site setup and difficult environments where efficiency may be required. And later in the week, I believe, Ross is going to be looking at the UAS Master and TBC workflows. So if you want to know more about the exact process of back and forth between those, then tune in for his session. I'll open it up for any questions that you might have, either through the chat window or through the or through unmuting and pinging me some questions there. I had forgotten that I left my webcam on, so apologies for whatever I was doing while I was concentrating on other things. If you do have any questions Here we go. How much loss you use all Trimble software but no Trimble hardware? Interesting. So we've just had a question come through around what information we lose if we're not using Trimble hardware. So I haven't done a lot of experimenting with this, but from a Trimble Business Center perspective, am I still screen sharing? Hang on, I'll share again. Share screen. Okay. From a TBC perspective, keep bouncing back to that one. We have a nice workflow set up that when we're wanting to send it out to the field, we can use the send to sync function. If we weren't using Trimble hardware in the field, but we wanted to package, we're still using the Connect platform, we can do that. It just is a slightly different synchronizer. So there is this one called Trimble Connect Sync, and I apologize for the amount of connect and sync in all of these titles. They've become a little bit annoying at times, but it's all right if you've got a eidetic memory, which not many people do. So we all struggle with it. Now, everyone will be thinking you've got the same password. It's all dots. What Connect Sync allows us to do is we run it on any Windows platform. So I'm just running it on my desktop. We can have a Connect project where people are collaborating into, so that might be from our SketchUp teams in buildings or Tekla or any of these other products. And we can just come in here and choose to edit. And what it allows me to do is actually just pick a local folder that I want to synchronize from. So if you're working on a project in Business Center and you're feeding it to someone in the field that doesn't have a Trimble product, so you're not using that Sync Manager workflow, then you could just point this to that particular local drive, have it up in the cloud, and they can then run this on, if it's something like let's say a Panasonic tablet out in the field, run the same thing, and it will push it down into their controller. Where we start to lose some information is in the clever aspects. So things like an SX10 or an S series capturing these panoramas that are exactly aligned with all of the survey measurement. There's always a conflict with how much manufacturers want to open up to competitors as well. Sometimes it gets integrated, sometimes it doesn't. We would be able to take all of these observations. There are a few different exchange formats that provide that, but some of the really clever integrated pieces start to fall over. Now, I haven't tested this, but from a Trimble Clarity perspective, we would be able to still take on any point cloud coming from any location. We deal with all of the standard industry standard point cloud formats. Mainly, we retile them as a particular format, but if you load up a LAS, it'll be fine, or an E57. The panoramas are using KMZ, so there probably is a way to actually create these, but it wouldn't be as straightforward as just a simple click in TBC to get them to flow through. And then if people are using other packages other than SketchUp for Clarity to be able to push this into the cloud platform, then the industry standard, which is OBJ, would be taken natively into this particular package. So we can facilitate a lot of things across different manufacturers and platforms. You lose a little bit of the seamless aspect where certain things are just a little bit easier